Most drivers believe that new cars only go bad because of factory defects. However, that's only true 12% of the time, which leaves you with 88% of the blame. In this video, I'm discussing 17 hidden habits that destroy your car before 50,000 miles. Some of these mistakes cost a few $100s to fix, while others can ruin your car and your credit score. At the end, I'll share a mistake that ruined a car in under 3,000 miles. Number 17. Warming your car wrong during winter. Let's begin with the number 1 killer of engine longevity. You've likely heard the statistic that 75% of engine wear occurs during startup. However, it's not the act of switching the car on that is a problem. The real danger happens when or how you step on the accelerator. The first mistake people make is idling. The first problem with idling is that it leaves a lot of unburnt fuel on the cylinder walls, which fouls spark plugs and can damage the exhaust system. The second problem is that it causes condensation and carbon deposits that contaminate oil. This can cause corrosion, which can eat up an engine in as little as 5 years. The other mistake people make is revving the engine before it warms up. It takes oil 10 to 30 seconds to reach critical components like piston rings, the camshaft, and the turbo. If you rev the engine before the oil gets there, it will create a lot of metal-to-metal contact. This can cause bearing failure if the bearings collide with the crankshaft. This can cost up to $5,000 to fix. The right way to warm your car during winter is to let it idle for 30 to 60 seconds. Then drive it at a moderate speed for the first 5 minutes. Once the engine is warm, you can speed up, but don't drive like a maniac. That comes with its own risks, which I'll discuss at number 7. But first, let's look at another innocent mistake that wrecks engines fast. Number 16. Frequent short trips. If you bought a car and most of your commute is within a 10-mile radius, you shouldn't have bothered. I know the dealer told you it was fine, but lying is their day job. Any trip that doesn't allow your vehicle to reach its optimal temperature is an engine destroyer for 3 reasons. The first is that short trips result in moisture buildup. Water is a natural byproduct of combustion. However, the excess moisture gets burned up at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. If your car doesn't get this hot, the water will cause sludge formation and corrosion in your exhaust system. The second problem is that cold engines don't burn fuel efficiently. That unburned fuel seeps past the piston rings and into the oil. This drastically reduces the lubricating power of oil, which can cause some of the problems we discussed in the previous point. The third problem is potential damage to your catalytic converter. Your CAT converter needs to run between 750 and 1,150 degrees Fahrenheit or 600 degrees Celsius to burn off harmful emissions. If it doesn't get that hot, it will clog and need a replacement. That's a $2,000 job at best. However, don't be surprised to get a bill of over twice that, depending on your car. If you must make a short trip, go the long way round or combine trips. Then once a week, hit the highway and gun it at least 60 miles per hour for 20 to 30 minutes. However, whenever it's time to floor it and you drive a manual, be careful of the next habit. Number 15. Lugging the engine. There is a reason why pure motorists love manuals. They are cheaper, more fun to drive, and cheaper to maintain. However, one wrong move can bring your car to a grinding halt. Lugging is when you're in too high a gear for the current speed, which forces the engine to work harder. That grumbling, jerking, or chugging sensation is a sign that your car is being pushed past its limit. If you drive a turbo, you might also hear a pinging or knocking sound. This is the result of uncontrolled combustion within the cylinder. This can damage pistons, bend connecting rods, and even cause catastrophic engine failure. And no, this doesn't only happen to high-mileage cars. I've seen cars suffer irreparable detonation damage in as little as 30 minutes. Lugging the engine also starves the engine of oil. With less oil flow, the crankshaft and the wheel bearings are more likely to collide. Again, you're looking at damage worth thousands of dollars. If you're new to driving a manual transmission, you need to watch this video. 13 Deadly Mistakes Manual Drivers Make. You can save it for later because up next is another destructive habit you can't afford to miss. Number 14. Resting on the gear shift. Sure, it might seem like it's saving you time, or might even look cool, but resting on the gear shift can ruin your credit score. This seemingly innocent habit can end up costing you $2,000 in repairs. That's because applying even the slightest pressure on the gear shift causes the selector fork to come in contact with the rotating synchronizer collar. These components are designed for brief contact only. Any longer, and it will generate a lot of friction and heat, which will eventually damage the fork. When this happens, your transmission will begin to shift poorly, or you could even get stuck in gear. What is even more frightening is that while you're driving, the gear could just slip into neutral. On the highway, that's the recipe for an accident. However, a failing fork is easy to spot. You'll hear weird noises when you shift, and changing gears will become difficult. That's your cue to see a mechanic or risk a catastrophic event. Speaking of catastrophic events, the next habit takes the prize. Number 13. Leaving the car in park without the handbrake. Over the past 5 years, Kia and Ford have recalled a combined 1.5 million cars because of faulty handbrakes. If you go back even further, Mazda, Toyota, and Mitsubishi have also issued massive recalls for the same problem in the past decade. Why is it such a big deal? After all, aren't the cars in park? When a car is put in park, the entire weight of the car is placed on a small piece of metal called the parking pal. While this metal is strong, it has a hard time competing with gravity. When you park on a hill, you're putting too much pressure on the pal, which can cause it to break. All of a sudden, your stationary vehicle begins to move by itself. At the very least, you're looking at damage to your vehicle in the thousands. Let's not even bring up what could happen if your car slams into pedestrians. The correct parking sequence is to put your car in neutral, engage the handbrake, then move into park. This way, the pressure will be on the rear brakes instead of the pal. Later in the video, I'll expose another major problem drivers make with the gear shift. But first, let's discuss something that can wreck an engine in fewer than 20,000 miles. Number 12. Overusing launch control. Ever wondered why you have to go through several steps before you use launch control? That's because car makers don't want you to use it too often. In fact, most cars have a maximum limit before the feature stops working. Some manufacturers even use it as a means to void your warranty. But why put a feature you don't want people to use? Launch control was built for racing, not for your donut break at Costco. Every time you use this feature, you're placing enormous strain on the clutch, transmission, drive shaft, and axles. That's why the BMW ZF8 transmission caps it at 50 uses. Some cars, like the Lamborghini Huracan, go as high as 250. Still, if you used this every time you were at a red light, it would disappear quickly. Using it in quick succession can also trigger limp mode and cause mechanical failure. I've seen launch control cause gearbox failure in less than 20,000 miles. If your car has this feature, make sure you study your manual and warranty to know what the limits are. You don't want to be left with a $10,000 repair because you were having fun. Time to switch gears and look into the type of fluids you put into your car. Number 11. Using low-quality fuel. Did you know that it takes as few as 30,000 miles for carbon buildup to start affecting your engine? That's why some experts recommend decarbonizing every 2 to 3 years. However, this only applies when you use low-quality fuel. Carbon buildup is a natural part of the combustion process. That is why fuels have additives to help break down some of these deposits. However, fuel from filling stations, whether regular or premium, doesn't have enough additives. That is why car makers have endorsed top-tier fuel. A study by the AAA showed that non-top-tier gas produces 19 times more engine deposits than top-tier gas. This drastically increases how often you need to get your car professionally cleaned, which costs roughly $1,000. That makes the extra cents you spend on top-tier fuel worth it. If you insist on being cheap on fuel, you might fall for the trap I'll reveal in a couple of minutes. Before then, I've got another fuel-related warning. Number 10. Constantly driving with low fuel. According to a survey by AAA, 74% of drivers rely on the miles to empty light to determine when they should buy fuel. The reason is something we can all relate to, which is that drivers want to maximize the fuel in their car. But at what cost? The first problem with this is that this light is unreliable, as it can underestimate how much fuel you have left and leave you stranded. But the main problem is that constantly running low will damage the fuel pump. Your car's fuel pump needs the surrounding gasoline to keep it cool and lubricated. Once this runs low, it begins to overheat. Fuel pumps are built to last at least 100,000 miles, but this practice will cut their lifespan in half. While spending $1,000 on a fuel pump replacement is a drag, that's not the real danger. A failing fuel pump can cause stalling, which can put you and other drivers in serious jeopardy. Always keep your tank at least 1/4 full and never below an eighth if you can't help it. Forget this a few times, and you might be fine. But there is no forgiveness for the next mistake. Number 9. Using the wrong oil viscosity. Remember what we said earlier about cold starts and engine damage? I forgot to mention one wrinkle. If you use oil with the wrong viscosity, it doesn't matter how well you warm up your car. You're going to need a new engine fast. Modern engines are built with incredibly tight tolerances, which leaves little room for error. So when you use 10W40 instead of 0W20, for example, you're running the risk of oil starvation. You're also risking overheating, variable valve timing issues, and increased friction. Sure, it can also reduce fuel economy, but that's minor compared to the problems I just listed. Engine overheating can warp cylinder heads, crack engine blocks, or even damage the transmission. That's over $4,000 in damages. If it damages both the engine and the transmission, that's twice the cost. Valvoline warns that using thicker oils can damage an engine in under 15,000 miles. That's why manufacturers write the viscosity rating on the oil cap. If you've made this mistake, you need to perform a full purge immediately. If you think this is bad, I've got something much worse at the end of the video. But up next is another fluid that can be brutal to engines. Number 8. Using cheap aftermarket additives. Over 580 million liters of bottled fuel additives are sold in the US each year. But here's the kicker. Not a single one has the full endorsement of any regulatory body. Yet millions of people fall for false claims of a 20% boost in fuel economy or magical octane numbers. And the worst one, promises to revive damaged engine components. That is why the vast majority of mechanics and motorists believe that additives are snake oil. Additionally, engine oil and fuel already contain additives. Top-tier fuel, in particular, has a higher concentration of PEA than most bottled alternatives. But if you've been following this channel for a while, then you know that we are big believers in additives. I've seen them decarbonize thousands of cars, restore lost MPGs, and even clean catalytic converters. However, we also know that there are many dangerous ones out there that can ruin your engine in minutes. We've discussed them in this video. 13 engine additives that work and 5 that'll kill your car. Next is something that won't just kill your engine, but also puts your life in jeopardy. Number 7. Driving aggressively. It's very tempting to want to push a new car to its limits, almost like breaking in a horse. In the words of Dominic Toretto, you want to drive it like you stole it. Unless you have enough money to replace it, that's never a good idea. Let's start with the basics. Rapid acceleration and hard braking burn fuel and put enormous stress on your car. The US Department of Energy estimates that aggressive driving lowers gas mileage by 30% on highways and 40% in stop-and-go traffic. That's over $1 per gallon wasted. The bigger problem is the impact it has on your tires. Hard braking generates extreme heat of up to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. This can warp rotors and wear out pads and calipers much faster, which puts your life at risk. Roughly 35% of car crashes due to poor vehicle maintenance are caused by tire-related issues. If your tires don't betray you, your engine and transmission will. The constant high-stress cycles, stress transmissions, and mounts can cause engine failure in just 30,000 miles. It would be a shame to keep making payments on a car that's been totaled. And that's what can happen with the next habit too. Number 6. Using cheap jumper cables. Reviving a dead battery is one of the first things you need to learn as a driver. While it is a simple process, an improper jump start can be a multi-thousand-dollar mistake. Modern cars are packed with sensitive electronics, including the electronic control units. The average vehicle has between 30 to 50 ECUs, but luxury cars can have over 100. So, when you connect the jumper cables incorrectly or use a poor quality set, it can cause serious damage. We're talking melted wires, a fire, or even completely fried ECUs and airbag modules. In some cases, the damage is so bad that it's easier to replace the car than to fix it. Never use cheap jumper cables. Cartman jumper cables cost less than $30 on Amazon, and they are as reliable as they come. But do you know what's worse than using poor quality jumper cables? I'll reveal that at the end of this video. Up next, I've got another silent killer. Number 5. Overloading your car. More than 80% of truck-related accidents result from truck overloading. While the stat is not as high for commercial vehicles, they still pose a serious threat. Going past your car's gross vehicle weight rating puts massive strain on your suspension, brakes, and drivetrain. That's why car makers put that information on the door jamb. If you make this a habit, you'll wear out the shocks, struts, and springs. If you have to replace the entire suspension, you're looking at over $2,000. But that's not the worst of it. Overloaded cars are harder to control and have longer braking distances, making them more prone to accidents. You could be looking at a write-off or a lawsuit, and that's exactly what can happen with the next problem. Number 4. Using the wrong tire pressure. According to the NHTSA, over 11,000 accidents occur each year due to tire-related problems. And the leading cause of this is under or overinflated tires. Not pumping your tires to the right PSI can result in blowouts, increased braking distances, and improper traction. Many drivers have no idea what the right PSI for the car is. They think it's the number on the sidewall of the tire. That's just the maximum PSI the tire can handle. What you need to do is to look at the number printed on the driver's side door jamb. You should also check your tire pressure once a month, and don't wait for the tire pressure light to come on. That light is an indicator that your tire pressure is 25% less than it should be. When this happens, you are 3 times more likely to be involved in a car crash. Wrongly inflated tires also reduce fuel economy, worsen handling, and affect the suspension system. If you value your car and your life, always stay on top of tire pressure. But do you know what you shouldn't stay on top of? The next thing. Number 3. Riding the clutch, manual cars. There's something about driving a manual that makes you feel like you're a Formula 1 driver. However, those brands spend millions of dollars on each car, which is why they can afford bad habits. You, on the other hand, have no reason to rest your foot on the clutch pedal continuously. Riding the clutch is the leading cause of premature clutch replacement. When you press the pedal, even slightly, it causes the clutch release bearing to make contact with the pressure plate. This friction causes both components to fail prematurely. When this happens, you're looking at a $2,500 tab. Habitual clutch riding can cause throw-out bearing failure in just 40,000 miles. So, don't think this is a habit you have time to stop. Break it now before it breaks your bank account, just like the next bad habit. Number 2. Shifting from drive to reverse before a complete stop. Now we come to one of the most expensive habits on this list, and arguably the dumbest. Unless it's an emergency, there is never a good reason to change from drive to reverse while the car is still moving. This applies to both manual and automatic transmissions. When you shift from drive to reverse, or vice versa, before the car stops, you're forcing the transmission to act like the brake. This places high shock loads on the gears, dog teeth, synchronizers, and other components. Over time, this will damage the transmission gears, drive shaft, and axles. Once you ruin your gearbox, be prepared to splurge up to $7,000. But do you know what's worse? Number 1. Using cheap aftermarket performance chips. Everybody knows that if you want to get maximum power from your car, you can't trust the manufacturer. A basic ECU tune can get you as much as a 5% boost in horsepower, and it only costs a few $100s. However, this only works if you go to a trusted mechanic. Cheap performance chip and aggressive tunes change ignition timing, turbo boost, and fuel delivery. However, if these changes aren't matched with the right hardware upgrades, you could be facing catastrophic failure. In fact, ECU tunes are responsible for more blown pistons under 30,000 miles than anything else. To make it worse, many tunes void warranties and lead to insurance denial claims. One driver in the UK tuned his Lotus Elite, only to suffer catastrophic engine failure 4,000 kilometers later. That repair would cost at least $12,000 if he's lucky. This applies to all cheap OEMs and upgrades that void warranties and are unreliable. Whatever gains they claim to deliver aren't worth the thousands in damages. So, here you have 17 habits you need to stop immediately or risk losing your car, your money, or your life. And as the owner of a new car, you're probably eager to make some much-needed upgrades. But before you buy any mods, watch this video before you do so. 17 performance mods that secretly destroy your engine.